welcome back to another Think Spree video. If you enjoy learning strange, surprising stories from history sprinkled with a bit of humor, you're in the right place. Before we dive into today's topic, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss out on the next video where we uncover more weird and wonderful tales that make you say, wait, what? Now, let's talk about a military conflict so bizarre, it sounds like a punchline, except it actually happened. This is the story of the Great Emu War, an episode in Australian history where the military went to war against birds. Yes, you heard that right. Australia declared war on emus, giant flightless birds, and they lost. It sounds like a joke, but it's a real event with real consequences, and it reveals much about military strategy, policy missteps, and the strange ways media can shape public perception. So, why did Australia go to war with emus in the first place? The story begins in the late 1920s and early 1930s, during the Great Depression. Like many countries at the time, Australia's economy was struggling, and farmers were particularly hard hit. After World War I, many Australian soldiers were given land in Western Australia to farm as a way to help them reintegrate into civilian life. These were known as soldier settlements. The government hoped agriculture would boost the economy, but it was tough going. The land was often dry and not ideal for farming, and the prices for wheat, the main crop, were low. On top of these hardships, a different problem arrived: the emus. These large birds, native to Australia, were migrating inland after their breeding season. Around late 1932, thousands of emus moved into the newly established farmland areas, searching for food and water. The farmers found their crops being trampled and destroyed. Imagine spending months growing your wheat, only to have a giant bird come in and turn your hard work into a buffet. The emus were causing significant damage, eating crops, destroying fences, and threatening the farmers' livelihoods. The farmers pleaded with the government for help. The government, in turn, decided to respond with military force. Yes, the military. The reasoning was that these emus were a pest problem too big for farmers to handle alone, and since they were damaging crops critical to food supply and the economy, a stronger response was warranted. In November 1932, Major G.P.W. Meredith of the Royal Australian Artillery was put in charge of the operation. Armed with 2 Lewis machine guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition, the soldiers set out to cull the emu population and protect the crops. On paper, this seemed like a practical solution: deploy the military, take out the pest, problem solved. But the reality was very different. The emus proved to be surprisingly resilient and cunning opponents. These birds are fast, capable of running up to 30 miles per hour, and they have a natural ability to scatter and regroup quickly. The soldiers quickly discovered that the emus were not easy targets. When the soldiers tried to shoot them, the birds would sprint away before the guns could be effectively used. Sometimes the guns even jammed in the heat of the battle. One famous encounter involved soldiers trying to ambush a group of emus. They lined up and fired their machine guns, but many rounds missed or failed to stop the birds. In fact, the emus running and scattering made the military's efforts inefficient and frustrating. At one point, a truck was used to chase emus and shoot from it, but the rough terrain caused the truck to break down, further complicating things. Over the weeks, it became clear that the military campaign was not achieving its goals. The emus were still damaging crops, and the soldiers had expended thousands of rounds of ammunition with relatively few birds killed. The media began to pick up the story, often with a humorous slant. Headlines poked fun at the war against birds, and public opinion started to turn skeptical. Even some politicians questioned the wisdom of sending soldiers after birds. Eventually, the government called off the operation. The military withdrew, having failed to control the emu population significantly. The farmers were left to deal with the birds on their own. The Great Emu War had officially ended in defeat for the armed forces. Now, let's unpack why this is more than just a funny story about soldiers versus birds. The Great Emu War highlights some important truths about military intervention and policy decisions. First, it shows the danger of using military solutions for problems that don't fit a military framework. Soldiers and weapons are designed to deal with human enemies or organized threats, not wildlife with unpredictable behavior. The emus were not a traditional enemy. They didn't have bases or strategies. They moved fast and adapted quickly, and their behavior confounded the soldiers. This mismatch between military tactics and the nature of the problem meant that the campaign was doomed from the start. Second, the story reflects on how government policy can sometimes be out of touch with practical realities. The government wanted to protect farmers and agriculture, which was a legitimate concern, but sending soldiers with machine guns after birds was a disproportionate and ineffective response. It was a case of trying to apply a one-size-fits-all solution to a complex issue involving environment, wildlife, and farming. Third, the Great Emu War reveals how media coverage can shape public perception of government actions. The media had a field day reporting on the war, often emphasizing its absurdity and failure. This shaped how people saw the government's response, as a misstep, a farce, and a public relations disaster. In some ways, the Great Emu War became a lesson in humility for the Australian government. It showed that even powerful institutions can be humbled by unexpected challenges. It also highlighted the need for better understanding and cooperation between policymakers, scientists, and local communities when dealing with ecological or agricultural issues. The emus, for their part, seemed to come out as the unlikely victors. After the war, the government tried other methods to control the emu population, including bounty systems and fences, but the birds remained a persistent presence. Over time, farmers adapted their practices, and the emus settled back into their natural role in the environment. Interestingly, the Great Emu War has also become a cultural reference point, a symbol of a military defeat that is both humorous and thought-provoking. It reminds us that history is full of strange episodes that challenge our assumptions about power, control, and the natural world. If you're enjoying this, don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you get notified when the next Think Spree video drops. We cover all kinds of weird history, science, and stories that make you think, and maybe laugh a little too. To wrap up, the Great Emu War is more than just a funny headline or an odd historical footnote. It's a real example of how military might isn't always the answer, how government policies can misfire when they don't consider the complexity of a problem, and how media can turn serious events into unforgettable stories. It's a reminder that sometimes, nature wins, even when it's just a bird. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep your curiosity alive and your sense of humor handy. Because history isn't just about dates and battles, it's about the unexpected stories that make us smile and think.